In the wake of Zeno's departure, the bridge he built remained, but the winds over the water had grown cold and restless. The nation needed a different kind of architect, not one who dreamt in marble, but one who understood the intricate gears of the world's machinery. Vedran, a man of numbers and logic, stepped out from the quiet halls of academia and finance. He met Zeno at the threshold of the government house, accepting a heavy ring of keys that represented both a hard-won peace and a mounting storm of global uncertainty. The year 2022 arrived with a shadow that stretched across the entire continent. The cost of warmth and light began to climb like a mountain peak that had no summit. Vedran sat with his advisor Mila, surrounded by flickering monitors and stacks of economic ledgers. He knew that the people cared little for the grand speeches of the past, if their homes were cold in the present. His task was to keep the gears turning, finding a way to shield the vulnerable from the biting frost of a world in crisis. While the internal gears grinded, a new wall appeared on the horizon. To the east, a neighbor demanded a rewrite of history before the gates to the great family would open. A messenger from the west, a tall man named Felix, arrived with a scroll of compromises known as the proposal. It was a bitter pill, requiring the nation to weave new threads into its constitutional tapestry. Vedran and Felix walked through a quiet gallery, discussing the heavy price of progress. The proposal ignited a fire in the heart of the capital. Many saw the compromise not as a bridge, but as a surrender of their very essence. Vedran and Mila stood by a window, watching the smoke of flares rise from the square below. Mila asked if the cost was too high. Vedran looked at the map of the continent, seeing his small nation as a vessel that would surely sink if it stayed anchored in the harbor of the past while the storm gathered. The decision was made. Vedran chose the path of the possible over the perfect. He stood before the legislature, his voice steady as he explained that the future required a sacrifice of pride to ensure a legacy of security. Outside, the voices were loud, but inside, Vedran and Mila worked through the night to secure the votes. He was not looking for a statue in his honor. He was looking for a seat at the table where his people's fate would be decided. With the agreement signed, the gates finally creaked open. Vedran met Felix again, this time in a grand hall, where the flags of many nations fluttered. The first official meeting of the path to the great family began. It was a victory of technicality and persistence. Felix shook Vedran's hand, acknowledging that while the path ahead was long and filled with 1,000 more ledgers to balance, the first and hardest step had been taken. But the winter of the world did not relent. To keep the lights on, Vedran traveled to the roaring heart of the nation's power plants. He stood with Nico, a worker whose face was etched with the soot of the furnaces. They spoke not of grand alliances, but of the voltage required to keep a hospital running and the coal needed to warm a school. Vedran realized that his true ledger was not filled with gold, but with the trust of those who worked in the dark. Vedran knew that his nation could not survive as a lonely fortress. He reached out to Besnik, a leader from a neighboring land to the west. Together, they looked at the borders that had once been obstacles and saw them as gateways. They spoke of open skies and shared markets, dreaming of a region where a truck full of grain could travel as freely as the wind. It was a practical peace, built on the reality of shared needs. As the season of 2024 approached, the political winds shifted once more. The people were tired of the long journey and the many compromises. Vedran sat with Mila in the garden of the government house, the air filled with the scent of coming rain. He knew that the era of the technical leader was reaching its twilight. He began to organize his files, ensuring that whoever followed would find a house that was stable, even if the exterior was still weathered by the storm. On his final day, Vedran did not leave with a flourish of trumpets. He walked to the gate where Zeno stood, waiting to welcome his friend back to the life of a private citizen. Vedran handed back the heavy keys, his ledger now balanced as best as the times allowed. He looked back at the government house, a building no longer isolated, but connected by 1,000 invisible threads to the world beyond. He had been the steady hand in the storm, and for now, that was enough.